Go ahead and get started. Cool. Okay, so we're going to start things off with a quick scenario. Imagine that you just started a new project. The clients have a really good idea of what they want, and they're really nice people. They're loving all of your ideas. It feels really good, and it really seems like they really get it. They understand what's going on. So you spend months designing a beautiful, well-thought-out website. It's scalable. The taxonomies make a lot of sense. You even have a design system. It's really awesome. Good job, you. So everything passes QA. And then it's time for the client team to start content entry. And they are super excited about doing this. So you let them into the site. They're entering content. Seems like things are going really smoothly. Shortly before launch, you go in to take a peek. And then this is your face, just seeing what the client has done to your site. So you might find yourself saying things like, wait, why did they use that component like that? 20 tabs in a vertical tab component, are you serious? Their headlines are literally like 5 times longer than they're supposed to be. So I'm sure that we can all relate to that. At this point, you need to show other people, so you call the rest of the design team around your computer so they can validate your feelings. And then you utter that one thing that us designers and developers like to say. The client always ruins their site as soon as we hand it over. Am I wrong? I don't think so. Okay. So I know I've definitely said that on more than a few occasions. It's so easy, right? It's the client's fault. It's our default answer. That's me, by the way. My name is Jessica Ito. I'm a UX designer at Elevated Third. A little bit about me. I spent 4 years as a public affairs specialist in the Marine Corps, which is really just a fancy way to say that I was a journalist and a photographer, so that was really fun. I received the distinguished honor of producing our magazine that we made, our quarterly magazine. It's called the Continental Marines Magazine. And I just want to show you really fast like how amazing that magazine was. So when I was put in charge, I had no idea what I was doing, and neither did anybody else in my office. So naturally, I got an InDesign for Dummies CS5 book, taught myself everything I needed to know, and produced this lovely publication. Believe it or not, I really enjoyed doing this. So after I got out of the Marine Corps, I decided to go to design school, and I've been designing ever since. I've been working with Drupal and doing UX for about 3 years now. And I like it a lot better than I thought I liked doing that. A little bit about Elevated Third. So we've been around for about 15 years. We're based in Denver. We're a preferred Acquia partner. We have a few fabled Acquia Grandmasters. And all of this stuff is really just to let you know that I'm legit, and believe me. So on the design team at Elevated Third, we started to notice a pattern with the whole kind of pouting whenever we saw what clients did to our site thing. Essentially, we produced great sites, or so we thought. The client did content entry, they messed everything up, and then we pouted about it, and nothing got better. So you don't want the site looking like a hot mess, and I'm sure the client doesn't want that either, believe it or not. Let's just talk about a couple of reasons why it might happen. So 1, your client doesn't know their site as well as you do. You spend months working on this site. Every decision that you make with this site is intentional. Sure, your client said they understood what was going on throughout the process, but there's nobody who understands the ins and outs of this site better than the people who worked on it. 2, your client isn't thinking about their content in terms of the design, and I think that this is a really big killer. At least with a lot of the sites that I work on, clients are having to go from huge chunks of long-form copy into digestible bite-sized pieces, and they usually have a hard time adapting their content to fit. Or 3, maybe they have an intern doing content entry, and we all know how exciting that is. But really, your client probably didn't have all the tools and knowledge they needed to build their site successfully. And this is what we started to realize at Elevated Third, is maybe it's not the client's fault. I'm sure some of it is, but really though, on the design team, we started asking ourselves, what could we have done to help the client be more successful? Or better yet, what can we do to help our clients be more successful? You see, as a designer, you're aware of the many elements that must come together in order to form a successful website. Unfortunately, most clients don't have this knowledge, and that's why they hire people like us. So clients often have no idea how to describe what they need, how to measure what they're looking for, or evaluate the work that's being produced. And as designers and developers, it's our job to help site owners and stakeholders figure these things out and to give them the tools and knowledge they need to evaluate whether what we're doing is what they actually need. And without that insight, clients have nothing to go on but gut instinct and subjectivity. So before we dive into a couple examples, I just wanted to let you know that a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are pretty specific to our process at Elevated Third. What I'm hoping is that you can take little chunks of this, and I'm hoping something strikes you and you say, oh, that's a good idea, and you can take it back and find a way to incorporate it into your process. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to this, and I think I was told before I came here that not a whole lot of people are using atomic design, but it seems like at this conference that's a pretty popular method. So we do use atomic design, we use components, and we use paragraphs to do that. So now I'm going to jump into a couple of ways that we can actually practically empower our clients to be successful site builders. I think the first thing that I want to talk about is content, and I can't stress enough how important it is to help your client understand the role that their content plays in the overall design and experience of the site. If the content fails, everything that we're doing is for nothing. None of it matters, essentially. So even if the design and the development of a site are perfect, if the content isn't organized well and the message isn't clear, none of it matters. And on the reverse side, even if the design and development aren't fantastic, if the content's organized and it has a good message, the content will be your hero. So this is something that we talk to our clients a lot about at Elevated Third. Most of the sites that we work on have what we lovingly refer to as these wall of text marketing pages. And then, of course, in the design process, we introduce these components in order to make their content more digestible and actionable. This always sounds really good in theory to clients, but when it's time to put it into practice, they can have a hard time doing that. So what you guys need to do is help your client understand the likelihood that their current content is perfect and should remain unchanged is very low. Most of the time, a website redesign requires thoughtful editing, reorganizing, archiving, and or deleting of said content. And the sooner that you can help your client realize this and so that they can get started working on it, the better. And clients are usually really afraid of this because it means a lot of work. But I like to challenge my clients to think of a redesign as an opportunity to just do some spring cleaning. And as we all know, that's not incredibly fun, but when it's done, it feels really good to just have it done. So this is an example of, I'm going to walk you through this example of a content audit that we did with one of our clients. And I think this is a good starting point and a good way to get your clients thinking critically about their content. So this particular client knew that they wanted to evaluate their content, but they were feeling a bit overwhelmed as to where to start. So our team ran a manual crawl, we crawled the site and then we did a manual audit of almost every single page on their site. And as you can see here, we kind of started to note a few things. We noted whether the content was referenceable or actionable, whether it was timely or evergreen, and then we noted some of the things that some of the components that we were noticing on the page. So is it a long form page? Is there tabular data? We noticed that there are points of contact on a lot of those pages. So really just like identifying a lot of the patterns that you're seeing as you're going through and doing this manual audit. That allowed us to, like, just as we were going through that audit, these aren't final, but just taking note of potential taxonomies that you're seeing, potential content types as well. And then we shared this and opened up this document with our client and told them our findings. We shared with them the potential taxonomies, etc. And then our client actually started using this same document to conduct the audit of their own. So we gave them a starting point, and as you can see here, like I was really proud of this client because they were actually using this document. A lot of times we'll give our clients tools and they just kind of don't use them. But they were actually like actively in this document a lot, assigning pages to people on their team to decide whether they wanted to keep the pages, rework the pages, or remove them completely. So I think what's important here is this document gave our client some insight into the way that we think about content before we even started anything visual at all. So also I wanted to talk about like letting wireframes be the visual tool that you use to check in on those content decisions that you made together in the first step. So once you get into the wireframes, continue tying the wireframes back to those content and strategy boring spreadsheets that you made. I think it helps give the clients a frame of reference and help them begin to see how everything's connected. So an example of a conversation might go something like this. So, hey, do you remember when we talked to you about the potential content types we found when we were doing the content audit? Here's an example, or we're going to show you the wireframe that we did for the news content type. Here's the wireframe. I'm also going to pull up an example of a current news page, and let's talk about what's different and why it's beneficial to you. Hey, see these related materials over here? This is an example of how we're using some of those taxonomies that we talked about in the content audit as well. So just like continuing to tie all these things together, you'll begin to illustrate the value of everything that you're working on and the complexities that are involved with each piece. Wires, as we all know, are also great to explain your decision making about components and content references as well. So this is something that we like to do a lot, pulling up a client's current design side by side with a wireframe and just really explaining like how the content maps over and why you made the decisions that you did. So I'm going to walk through this example a little bit. This client, they offered degree programs in the healthcare industry, so they had like different groups of degrees. This is showing graduate certificates. They also had associates, bachelors, etc. So each group of degrees on their old site had its own page, and then if a user wanted to sort of browse to try to figure out what degree they're interested in, they had to go to that specific page, and then they had to open each degree description individually, which is just like kind of cumbersome. So we explained to the client, we created one like vertical tab component that allowed for an easier browsing experience. Their users didn't have to make a decision in the nav right away about what kind of degree they wanted. They could just like quickly click back and forth through all of these. All of the degree descriptions were expanded so they could easily browse. This component got a little bit long, but we were able to make it more engaging by pulling this call to action into something, first of all, like pulling it out a little bit and having it sticky within this section of the page. So as you're scrolling through the degree descriptions, it's like hanging out right there with you. So explaining logic and things like that to your client helps them to prepare to hopefully be able to make similar decisions in the future. This is another example. So this page on the left over here, I think is a pretty, an example of one of those long form marketing pages that we see a lot. And this page over here, as you can see, is a component page. And this client in particular was very intimidated about having to do this on their own, about having to map this long-form content page into a component page. So again, just like explaining your logic to your clients to help them be able to do this for themselves. So in this case, we noticed that they were urging their users to submit technology to their program, but there wasn't really like a super obvious next step for users. So we told the client, hey, we pulled out that link in a big obvious call to action for your users, and then we explained how to submit in a little bit more visual way down below. And I don't know about you guys, but I think I've noticed that clients have a hard time understanding node references, and I think if you're creating a lot of them, it's really important to make sure that you clearly explain what's going on and most importantly, why it's beneficial to your client. So I'm going to show an example here. We find that InVision freehand works really well for this. Has anyone used freehand for anything? No? Okay. Oh man, this is exciting. Okay. So InVision freehand, first of all, is a really cool tool. It's like an endless artboard essentially, and it forces you to stay really rough. So you can like draw, you can collaborate with people, you can share it, and you can both be drawing things together. There's like easy ways to make like boxes and things like that. We use it a lot on our team. It like kind of forces us to stay rough and communicate the right ideas to our clients. We also like to use it to explain things like node references, which can be a little bit overwhelming to clients who aren't familiar with that idea. So I'm going to sort of walk you through this example. This client, we were working on a help and documentation site for them. So they had 4 products, and we knew that, based on user testing, the things that were really important to keep called out for each one of those products was an upgrade link. So how do I upgrade this product? A release notes link. How do I go and check out the release notes for the product? And then a get started link. How do I get started using this product? So what we did, we had a product content type over here. And this is where all the information about the product lived. And we decided, because we knew that these 3 links were going to be important to people throughout the website, we created fields that lived on the product content type. But they populated content in other places. So on the product content type, you can see there's a little call out here with an upgrade, release notes, and what's new link. Same thing, if I zoom out a little bit, each product had features associated with it. So we called those same links out on the feature content type as well. And then on the home page, you see we're pulling out the 4 products here on the front. And instead of having their content admin go through and manually add these each time, we just put a reference block on here that reference all 4 products, and it's pulling in those links. So I think, again, doing something like this in freehand or whatever tool you decide to use, pulling in screenshots of the back end can be really helpful to put that in a visual way so that your clients understand it. Okay. Cool. I think this is a fun one. Making sure your clients understand the implications of their visual choices. So I really love benchmarks, and I think that benchmarks are a great way to understand what your client's expectations are. But sometimes a client's benchmarks might be a little bit off base. So let's look at an example. One of our clients was a leading HR company, and essentially what they did was provide valuable resources to really busy HR professionals. So things like policies, handbooks, just general FYI info as well. So before we wrote a design brief and got started on anything visual for them, we asked them to have a meeting with us so that they could share some of their benchmarks, and we could just talk about visual expectations. They hadn't redone their site in a long time, so they were leaning on us heavily to sort of provide a new design direction for them, although we weren't redoing their whole brand. But this was an important meeting. So guess what the first benchmark on their list was? It was Pepsi. So yeah, it was Pepsi, and a lot of the benchmarks they sent over were pretty similar to this. And with this project, we were lucky enough to be able to do some user testing. And I say lucky enough because unfortunately we don't get to do that as much as we would like to. But anyway, these busy professionals told us essentially if they couldn't find what they were looking for within 2 minutes, they left and went to Google, or they left and went to a competitor, which I think is pretty on point. So imagine that you are a busy HR professional. I'm going to pull up another benchmark here. You're a busy HR professional. Somebody comes into your office with a burning question. You need answers now. And you come to a site like this. And this is being powered by me scrolling, by the way. Every scroll. So you can see like how that would be pretty frustrating for their users, right? So in this case, it was, it was my job as a designer to sort of gently help the client align their visual expectations with the needs of their users actually being able to find things. We were able to compromise by giving them a kind of cool header banner. That's like their homepage header banner that they have on the top. These like expansive accordion pieces, and then a couple of little like ooh and ah interactions, nothing too fancy, but this made the client happy, and their users were able to actually use the website. Wanted to touch on images as well, and I know, like, of course the layouts are a great place for designers to recommend imagery choices, but unless you're actually doing content entry yourself, there's no way that you can ensure every image that your client selects meets your standards. So a lot of times clients end up choosing things like this or like this, like what is she pointing to? If they're in the medical industry, this is a must. Direct eye contact, obviously. Love things like this, very inspirational. So I think the best thing that we can do before we even begin design is get an understanding of our client's imagery capabilities. And I think it's really important to understand whether your client will be able to support the type of imagery that you're including in your designs. So we find that this is best done with a conversation. So asking your client, how do you plan on sourcing your images? Some clients haven't even thought of this at the point when we ask them. Do you have any subscriptions to stock sites, and which ones? If they do, we like to design using the subscription site that they have. That way, if we find images that they really like, they can actually purchase them and use them on their site. If they don't, do they plan on getting a stock subscription? Or maybe it's time to talk about some resources like Unsplash or Pexels or something like that. Does the client have any imagery guidelines that they know of? A lot of times this will be included in brand standards, but I think it's good to include in this conversation as well. One of our clients in the healthcare industry, they couldn't have images of children on their website, and so if you go on iStock and search doctors, there's a lot of really cute pictures of kids at the doctor, so it's good to know that we couldn't use those, unfortunately. Having an understanding of who they have on their end that can support imagery production. So if you decide to get a little bit creative with the imagery, having an understanding of that is important. Or if they don't have anyone, do they have room in the budget for your team to help with images? I think even just like selecting images can be a cumbersome process that once a client gets in there and starts doing content entry and realizing like how hard of a job it is, that last point starts sounding a lot more valuable to them. So this is an example of a component that I put together, and it was a lesson learned for me. So I think there is a way that I could have avoided this. The image here really isn't adding a lot of value to this component whatsoever. So it was a big lesson in like, you don't always have to use images, especially if they're not adding value. So this was that same HR client that I was talking about before, and they have a lot of events. So this is an event component. And the way that I designed it essentially made the image wasn't a required field, but it would look weird without it. So the client did the only thing that they could and just picked a bunch of like terrible stock imagery. And this is just an example of, you don't always have to use imagery if it doesn't make sense for the content, or if the client can't support your imagery choices. You can still do a good job without using imagery.
Literally, I have basically the guidance counselors of my college say, you know what I want pictures. And I click here, it says do resumes or whatever, and they sent me this terrible clipper. I'm like,
No.
Do pictures of our own students that we took ourselves, and not with a blackboard, so it doesn't look like a classroom.
Yeah.
I can put these silly clip art, these tiny little clip art things on color blocks. And,
yeah. The struggle is real sometimes. Cool. So the last and most important point that I wanted to touch on today is running content entry in a way that's meaningful to your client. And I think starting with content types is very important. I don't know about you guys, but at Elevated Third, our training budget is a little bit limited. So typically we spend most of the training budget talking about actual page building itself, and we don't give content types the love that they deserve. Few reasons why I think it's important to really help your clients understand what content types are is it's literally, when they're building a page, it's the first decision that they're making, and that choice has a lot of implications, like what views will this content get added to, how will you be able to reference it, will certain components work on that content type that your client's selecting, and then if they select the wrong content type, that's really bad because then they have to rebuild the page and add a redirect, and nobody likes doing that. So just wanted to share an example of how this can go wrong. This is that help and documentation site that I referenced earlier, and with one of their products, they have 250 tools associated with that product. And I think you can think of the tools like Photoshop. Photoshop has tools, right? And if you needed help learning how to use a specific Photoshop tool, you might go to Photoshop's support website, and there will be a page dedicated to that tool that tells you how to use it. So that's what the page on the left is. That's like a tool detail page, and it's the tool content type as well. Each tool belongs to a category. So the page on the right is that tool's category page. In this case, it's Calgary. So the categories themselves were taxonomy terms. And so essentially, the way we decided to build the page on the right, let me back up here. The way we decided to build the page on the right was we essentially just published the node of that taxonomy term itself. So it wasn't a content type, but it was a taxonomy term with a node. That way, every time the client was building, this is the back end of an individual tool page, all they had to do was select the category that tool belonged to, and it would automatically get populated over here. So we didn't do the greatest job explaining this to our client, and when they went in to go do content entry, this is what they did, the page on the left. So they built this page on a landing page content type, which first of all, we told them like not to use for anything, but I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole right now. And they added everything here manually. So in one giant WYSIWYG, they added this icon, they added all the links manually, they added all the descriptions manually, when they actually didn't have to do any of that because these are all just referencing the tools. The client, when they saw the result of their page, was unhappy because it didn't look the way that it was supposed to. And we use Asana in our team, and we usually we'll create a client QA project in Asana. And this was a client QA task that the client made. They really wanted to know how to edit the page. First of all, they couldn't find it because it wasn't in the content list because it's not a content type, it is a taxonomy. So couldn't find it. He tried searching. He said, because he couldn't find it, he essentially tried to recreate the page on its own. Well, it looked like that. He's wondering how to import the images to a smaller size because we told them that images would size automatically. And we didn't show them how they would self-size. And we didn't provide any instruction on how to do that, even though everything's in a giant WYSIWYG. So my first response to this feedback was pretty much like, well, the client's not doing it right, so that's the problem. But upon some reflection, I realized that we actually didn't do a great job explaining those relationships to the client, and that's why this happened. So essentially this is a repeat of the slide in the beginning, but we did something similar to this for the client and walked them through in a visual way how we created all those relationships and why. And then the client was actually really happy to know that they didn't have to upload everything manually after that. So this is an example of a tool we'll look at in more depth a little bit later, but with part of our documentation we provide to our clients, we put together a content type guide of sorts. And it just sort of outlines the use case for each content type and things to know. So this is the product content type, and it's saying, hey, these 3 fields are going to populate content in a lot of places on the site, for example. And once your client has a good understanding of content types, I think that it's good to just go over the general concept of unstructured versus structured content, letting them know which content types are structured or unstructured. The point of this is to essentially let your clients know which content types that they can use components on. And then getting into components. This is an example of a component guide that we've made more recently. We try to put these together for our clients. The audience is our clients, so non-technical users. And we include things like a description or use case. We let them know what content types the component is allowed on, what fields the component has, which fields are required, and then how is that content generated? Is it totally manual? Is it manual but it's referencing something? Is it dynamic? If it's dynamic, what's the logic behind that? So I'm going to just open a quick example of one we've done in the past. And typically we've been laying these out in Sketch and then just uploading them into Envision. But we've recently started playing around with Envision Design System Manager for our clients, and I'm actually really excited about it because I think it'll save me a lot of time and be better for our clients. But this is an example of what we've been doing so far. So one of the first things that we do is we essentially create a component taxonomy for each individual project. And this isn't when I say taxonomy, I don't mean it in a technical way, but just assigning a prefix essentially to every component. So these are the header banner components. This is header banner info. This is header banner link blocks. We have simple components, and there's a description here of what that means, and kind of just generally trying to explain atomic design to our clients. So this is the simple content component, et cetera, compound components, and we we add these hotspots in here so that it's almost like a website, but it makes it easy for our clients to navigate. Here's the content type section, so just explaining to them, hey, this is where you can see where all of your content types are, and then here's the use cases for each one. We're even like putting in a little style section in here as well. We also use the paragraph browser in Drupal to sort of, as a way to extend that component guide into the admin UI. Our clients really appreciate being able to visually select the components, and we also, we have like a little use case down below, and I think that's just like helpful for them and easy for us. So once you're done talking about content types, components, it's time to sort of bring it all together and do like a little page building workshop. And this is a checklist that we share with our clients, and we recommend that they use this process until they feel more comfortable entering content into Drupal. So the first point I think is the most important, so I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit, and then we'll talk about the rest of them. The first point is making a quick sketch or like a plan for the page. And I think clients get really alarmed when they hear the word sketch. This is just a recording of me drawing some boxes in freehand, that other tool I shared earlier. But it doesn't have to be something super elaborate. I think just drawing out a couple of boxes and then maybe writing the name of the component that you're planning on using is enough. And what something like this allows your clients to do is just really think critically about actually making a plan before they just jump right in there and start making a page. So you're asking them to look at their current page, evaluate the content that's on that page, and actively like trying to use your component guide or whatever tool that you have to make selections for components and plan out that page. I always tell my clients it's really easy to replicate what you already have on your website by just putting everything into a WYSIWYG. But the real challenge is to use these more engaging components. So back to the rest of the checklist, I think everything else is pretty self-explanatory, but just ensuring that you have the media you need before you build the page, making sure that the page you're building doesn't already exist, adding that page to the menu as you're building it out if applicable, add the content according to your plan that you made, review and make adjustments, ensure all the links are working, add meta info, and publish. So then this is an example of a slide that I've actually used in client training, but if we have the time, we like to give them an hour to try and build some pages while they're there with us. So they have an opportunity to ask questions when they get stuck, because a lot of times when you're running content entry training, like it's all head nods and everything's fine, and then you send the client on their way and they actually like really don't know how to build a page. So giving them a chance to do this while you're there, I think can be really helpful. And then I have just a couple general training tips. Don't ask, does that make sense? I actually heard someone talk about this at DrupalCon this year, and it really resonated with me because I ask, does that make sense all the time? It's like a tick that I have. So if you ask somebody if something makes sense and they're in a room full of other people, most of the time they're going to say yes, just because they don't want to look like they don't know what's going on. So try asking that question in different ways, like, what challenges do you foresee your team having with this portion of the training, or something like that, that doesn't put it on them and make them feel bad for not understanding. This is an idea that we've been playing around with very recently, but inviting your client to actually participate in teaching part of the training. So instead of the client team sitting in a room listening to you or watching you build a page, invite someone from their team to come up and build the page while you walk them through it. So something like that, I think, would help keep the whole client team engaged, because it's fun to watch someone who's part of your team stumble over like doing something new in front of a group. But yeah, I think this is something that we're going to start incorporating into our process, and it'll hopefully help our clients cement learning a little bit. And then the last thing, I think, is just really focus on helping your clients be more successful all the time. It's never like a process that is like one and done. I think we all learn new things on each project that we're on, and we bring them into the next project that we work on. So the next time something is going wrong with the client and you have the instinct to say, well, the client should have done this or whatever, just take a step back and think about like how you contributed to that outcome, and ask yourself, what can I do better to help my client? That's it. Any questions? Yes.
Very good talk.
Thank you.
Thanks for it. You were talking about limited resources for education, like teaching the client, and gave just at the very end a very good example of involving them for the training. That's great. We also try to do that, but like in a little bit different way, to involve all of them, setting them in the front of a computer, and try to reproduce what we do on the front, you know?
Yeah.
That can be also a way. What I'd like to ask you is, how do you plan to deliver documentations for the same? So like there are 10 content editors who you are teaching once or twice for how the site will look like or how it will work. But then there will be an 11th, 12th colleague from their side who just doesn't know anything about it. So documentation.
Yeah, so usually what the question was, how do you provide documentation for your clients after content training so that they can continue to train people on their team to do the same thing? So typically what we do is we put together like a Google Slides deck, something similar to this, that we actually share with our client once the training is over. And a lot of times they are referring to that training deck all the time. We'll also elaborate on any points in like just a Google Doc as well. So we'll put like that training check or that page building checklist in there in the Google Doc. We also give them that component guide and content entry guide so that they can reference that whenever they want. Like I said, we're thinking about using Design System Manager as well, and we're really excited about that. We think that'll help our clients tremendously. So does that help? Cool. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Going back to that idea of people just throwing an image in that doesn't add any value, but it's required by the layout, and it looks funny if you leave it out. I see that all the time, and yet the other choice you made wouldn't be completely satisfactory, because there are some perhaps events where there is an image and it is more compelling. So do you have solutions for how you get the client either to agree that there aren't images or there are, or if you mix them, I mean, do you have a solution for that?
Yeah, so usually what I do is just try to balance my understanding of the client's capabilities to do image production with like how engaging it would be on the site for a user. So there's one example of a site that we did for a nonprofit. The clients were not very technical at all. They didn't have the time or resources to even select imagery, but they did have events. And I think the site's not launched yet, or else I wish I would be able to show you. But I think there are ways that you can just use basic layout to make it engaging enough without using images. And I think it's a challenge from a designer's perspective to be able to do that, because typically we just default to adding images. But I do believe there are ways to be successful without images. So I think it really depends on the situation and what your client's able to do, and the designer that you have working on it. But I think it's more of a challenge for the designer to do something that is effective without images. Yes.
I was just curious if Elevated Third has experimented with turning some of these typical trouble spots in terms of client training into revenue stream via post-launch support.
It's something that we're
Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah.
Because it won't be picked up.
Thank you. So the question was, has Elevated Third thought about like taking some of these client training issues that we see and turning them into additional revenue opportunities? And that's something that we've actually been talking about doing recently. For example, we had the idea of maybe once a month opening up after hours to allow our clients to come in for like a training workshop where they could just ask us questions and things like that. We do, if we find that clients really are truly struggling, we will obviously like recommend that we conduct additional training sessions, but we're time and materials, so that's up to them whether or not they want to do that. Any other questions? Cool. Thanks, guys.